This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.
Can I welcome everyone to the Police and Crime Committee meeting? This morning we will be holding a question and answer session with the Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime. Please make sure that your electronic devices are switched to silent mode to avoid any interruptions. Can I now ask our clerk, Lauren Harvey, if any apologies have been received?
Thank you, Chairman. We have not received any apologies today.
Thank you, Lauren. Can I ask the committee to note the recommendations set out at item 2 and ask if members have any other interest to declare? Thank you. Can we confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of November 2024 to be signed by me as a correct record? Thank you. Can we note the completed, ongoing and closed actions arising from previous meetings of the committee?
Noted.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So we now move on to the question and answer session, and I would like to welcome our guests, Kaya Comer-Schwartz, Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime, and Kenny Bowie, Director of Strategy and MPS Oversight, which of course is from MOPAC. So good morning to you both. So Kaya, the questions, as I said, are all coming to you, but if you can't answer, then Kenny can step in, because we've got quite a few questions. So I'll start. What lessons has MOPAC taken from the delivery and oversight of the Police and Crime Plan 2022-25, and how has this informed MOPAC's approach to the 2025-29 plan? Before you start, if I could just make it clear, most of us have not seen the plan. It came out at 6 o'clock last night. I, for one, haven't even opened it yet because, you know, we were doing other things last night. So we're going to be discussing the previous, or the one that's in act at the moment, but I'm asking you now how it's informed your approach to the new one that we're about to read.
Thank you and good morning. I think the most important thing that we've learned from the previous iterations is that we wanted to have the new plan to be sustainable across from now to 2029. So, you know, we have to take the current context of London at the moment and, you know, what's been working well. Obviously, having the brilliance of MOPAC is that all of the things we do are evaluated, and so we have a robust basis on what's working, as well as the commissioning we do and the monitoring we do. So that's all fed into why we're doing things now, what we think the priorities for the future should be, and how we want London to feel safe and be safe in 2029. So I think it's a really strong strategic document rooted in kind of a vision for the future, but also strongly driven by us wanting clear outcomes and impacts, and that's why it's got, you know, two kind of guiding principles about London as being safer and feeling safer, but also the three priorities around prevention of violence and reduction of violence, increasing trust and confidence, and better supporting victims and protecting people who've been exploited from harm, as well as improving the criminal justice system.
Yeah, well, I've been around here for quite a while, and because we heard the same from the last one. What do you feel about the successes or not of the last Police and Crime Plan?
I feel like there's been a lot. You know, the Mayor has been continually investing in this area. It's his, you know, one of his key top priorities, and I think we've seen real movement in important areas, including homicide, lethal barrel discharge, and violence with injury, as well as residential burglary being down by 12% and theft from motor vehicles being down from 10%. But I think in the context of coming out of a pandemic, which obviously vastly affected particularly young people, a significant cost of living crisis, there's obviously areas where we still need to focus, like robbery, and as we discussed last time, theft, and shoplifting, as well as our ongoing concern about young people and knife crime.
Well, obviously we disagree on that, because if you go back to the crime plan that we're still working from until next March, reducing and preventing violence, of the 13 measures tracked by MOPAC for this priority, 6 were achieved in the period covered by the PCP, that's the crime plan to date, and 7 worsened or remained the same. If we look at the volume of police recorded violence with injury, it increased by 4.5% in the 2 financial years since the publication of the PCP. If we look at total volume of total knife crime, which is not a PCP metric, but has increased by 24% from 17,701 offences in 2021 to 22 to 21,954 offences. The volume of knife crime with injury offences under 25 increased by 4.5%. The proportion of positive outcomes decreased for 3 of the 4 relevant metrics. Survey of the equality gap was highest for disabled people at 9% and LGBT people. It is littered with failures. Now, it could be that you could turn all of this round in 3 months, but I doubt it. Are you not quite mortified when you look at the last police and crime plan and realise just how bad things are?
I mean, I think I know, being, you know, my previous role, having to work under austerity for 14 years and all of public services being decimated in that time, and there being a significant cost of living crisis where families are having to make dire choices, that, you know, that's going to have an effect on Londoners and the outcomes. I think the Mayor has, you know, done an amazing job of not only
amazing job. Were you listening to some of the figures that I was just reading out there? Have you not looked at what's happened since the last police and crime plan came out? Have you not looked at the direction most things are going in?
Yeah, I obviously have.
I'll go back to my question then. Are you not mortified by that? Because as a Londoner, I'm pretty mortified by that.
Well, I think it's really important that we hold our duty about being proportionate and making sure that we don't scaremonger Londoners. But I think it's also really important that we're never, ever complacent about the safety of anyone in London. And I think you're right to make sure that we enact our equalities duty in that space. I think there's always going to be a lot to do in an inner city in these areas, and I'm sure Kenny can come back on the specific details of those offences if that would be helpful to the committee.
No, I'm just looking for you to be mortified that things have gone so badly.
As I said, I think that given the context of a pandemic that had children, you know, out of school for 2 years, having a cost of living crisis, that, you know,
Kaya, we had a
LSE has had research
we
that
had a
proved
pandemic where most people were stuck indoors, and the only people that were out running around the streets were, quite frankly, normally the villains or people or the public health workers going out. And that is a comment from a police officer. Okay, I am just looking for some humility about the fact that the last police and crime plan promised the earth and has delivered very bad results. Would you not agree with that?
No.
Or is the Mayor still wonderful and everything he does is wonderful?
I think that...
And it's everybody else's fault?
I think that you have to understand the societal context. I think that a continual investment in things like opportunities for young people, the Borg sector is tackling those issues full on. I don't think anyone's saying that the issues aren't significant. I don't think anyone's saying we can be complacent about it. I think we should always be ambitious for London. But, you know, I think that we have to make sure that we're doing all we can and continuing to be ambitious for London. And I think that you'll hopefully see that in the new plan, and that we should rightly, you know, have great oversight and evaluation of the things that we do and push ourselves to go further on them. I don't think, you know, a reduction in homicide is a small thing. I don't think a reduction in burglaries. I don't think making sure that the Met can go back and visit everyone after a burglary is a small thing. I think, you know, we're making progress in a lot of areas, but there's always going to be a lot to do, and we should be relentless in that.
Can I just add a couple of points of context?
Only briefly, because it's no good doing a plan, Kenny. Then everything from it, well, not everything, but most things are going in the wrong direction. And then not to to be quite mortified by this. But Kenny, briefly.
You know me, Chair.
Yes, I do, which is why I'm saying please make it very, very brief, because really we are here to question our Deputy Mayor.
No, absolutely. I was going to combine this and what you talked about in the first question about what have we learned and what could be improved. And I think one of the things we have genuinely learned about this is that forecasting and just setting general directions of travel for stuff don't necessarily work all that well, because it doesn't take account of wider societal context. So if you look at trust measures, for example, when we said we wanted to increase trust within the Metropolitan Police, absolutely we do, but what that didn't, if I'm honest, and it was me who put this in, so this is my fault, take account of is that trust in all public institutions across the Western world has been falling pretty rapidly.
But can we need to be concentrating on this?
That's what I'm saying, because the point about that is, of course, that's one of the metrics which, if you look at, will have gone in the wrong direction, and I'm not disputing that. What I'm saying, though, is that the context of that and trying to understand, because the trust in the Met has actually fallen relatively less compared to its peers, so it's actually in a better position.
I'm sorry. We need to be actually looking at this, and there weren't proper matrices in the last plan in any event. Finding performance data is so difficult to find because it's not in one place. I mean, performance data on the 54 metrics of the current police and crime plan is published right across a range of dashboards and different reports. Why is this? Why is there not a place that we can go to as the scrutiny body to actually look and see what's gone wrong and where it's gone wrong? Instead of that, it takes quite a few people to sit and go through various different metrics. Anyone would think that you didn't want us to find out how bad all these things are, but we have, and that's what I'm putting to you. It's no good doing a police and crime plan, then doing another one and saying, yeah, well, the last one didn't work, but we'll do something.
So, I mean, if there's suggestions or there are particular metrics that you don't think were available to you, please do feed that in, because we have tried to be transparent. We have produced a dashboard.
I will happily feed it in. We will write a letter to you, and we will make sure that's published. And then we would like to consolidate all the data reporting into a single source so that we can all go through it, and more importantly, that Londoners can go through it, because Londoners are not lucky enough to have researchers that will go through. I know some people want to come in on this. I'll wait to the end of my questioning, and then I'll bring you in. MOPAC has stated that the last theme of the Mayor's 22-25 Police and Crime Plan, protecting people from being exploited or harmed, will be, quote, assessed using a qualitative approach. What specific measures and evidence has MOPAC been using to assess performance in this area? Kaya.
Thank you. I mean, I think it's really impressive, the areas that MOPAC has looked at under this theme. For example, and I know this is something the committee mentioned last time, missing people problem, London stalking review, children sexual abuse, female at risk, the evaluation of hospital-based youth workers, the youth to adult hub evaluation, the evaluation of the VRU's Engage project, and the evaluation of the VRU's Divert project, the youth survey, and we're also obviously now working on, in the future, the child first approach, the appropriate adult scheme, and the violence harm assessment tool, and the problem profile into exploitation, and very importantly, a profile into online harms. All of those, the majority of those evaluations use a mixed data set, a mix of obviously hearing directly from victims and survivors, and also qualitative and quantitative basis. And I think that, you know, all of those have real richness, and make sure that we're, once again, making sure that we're investing in the right places, we're making the right recommendations to government. So I think there's, you know, a lot to be proud of in that area.
Really? Well, I could see you were reading that, but have you got a line in there on what progress has been made in protecting people from exploitation and harm?
Well, I think, for example, the work of the VRU, the evaluation of those things has led to more investment in opportunities for young people, over 250,000 opportunities for young people to divert them from crime. So I think it's really important that we have these evaluations. The work that, for example, the Victim Commissioner is doing at the moment on victim attrition is feeding into really important discussions on criminal justice, the criminal justice system, and how we want to improve delays in that. So
and that's protecting people from exploitation and harm.
Yes.
Right. Coming into this role, what influence have you had personally on the forthcoming police and crime plan? Because obviously it must have been halfway through before you came to this position.
Yes, obviously it was a lot of the work had already been done and drafted, but it's been brilliant to work with the team to actually learn about the work that they do through the plan. As I said, I've really been impressed by learning about kind of the commissioning work that they do, as well as the oversight and the Met work that they do, and reading the draft. It's been great, and I think, the thing that I've really been focusing on is making sure that the priorities are clear, that it's an accessible document, that we get a strong engagement plan with it, so that Londoners can feed in to the draft plan, the draft consultation coming forward, and that it's a very strategic document with a vision of a safe London for everyone.
Yeah, the last one was a strategic document, wanting everything to be wonderful for everyone, and as you will have noted by the figures I've just given you, it's clearly isn't working. So have you made sure then that all the data that you collect is in one place from the new plan? Have you made sure that that is something that we can have, that we can look at a document where your successes and failures are properly recorded?
Well, I think, I completely agree that any plan is only as good as its implementation and learning from it. So when we're going out to consultation now, when it, is finally signed off in March, we'll make sure that it has that dashboard and insight evaluation so that we can all make sure that we're looking at it and learning from it.
So that's a pledge then. You will make sure that it does, because we will hold you to that.
I know you will.
Yeah. Right. Lord Bailey, did you want to come in?
I just want to push back a little bit on this idea that it's all about resources. The former mayor, before our current mayor, had less police officers and less money and had less crime and better satisfaction. And the reason I put that to you is because whatever happens, you're not about to get a big influx of money. So what are you going to do besides having more money to get things done? And the last thing I'll say before as well, MOPAC has definitely had an enormous budget. Finance has not been your issue, and I'll be astonished if you tried to tell me that's an issue for MOPAC. You've had an enormous budget, particularly the VRU. So my question to you is twofold. What are you going to do besides ask for money to lift up these 54? So about half of the 54 measures have gone in the wrong direction. What are you going to do to improve them besides ask for more money?
Thank you, Lord Bailey, and I think your question is very pertinent. I think it's really important that we look beyond, financial resource. I think, especially in the work we do with the Metropolitan Police, lifting and supporting and challenging around the new Met for London plan is really important. That doesn't, take any extra resource. It takes clarity, prioritisation and dedication. And I think also your point also speaks to the brilliance of having the mayor as a convener. I know only in the last 2 weeks we've had brilliant conversations with the criminal justice system at all layers of the criminal justice system about how we can improve things. That's not resource, that's bringing interested parties together and really being clear on what we want to work on together and driving that forward. So I think there is a lot to do outside of resource.
Can I just be clear about what you've said to the chair? So you're going to collate in one place, one dashboard, to use the term, the 54 measures that plan actually looks for? Because currently everybody has to do quite a scramble to find that stuff. You're going to put it all in one place. Is that the pledge?
So when we have the new plan, that was the plan for the last one, so if I failed on that, I apologise. But yeah, and we're very happy to come and sit with anybody when we
No, we don't want
design
it to
the new
be sat
dashboard.
with. We want it so that the public, so that we can find it. Let's be very clear. You use the word failure. It's a huge failure that you have to be quite the genius to find these stats. And if you sense a level of frustration, it's been this way from the beginning, and this is your opportunity with your new plan to put these things in one place so they can be looked at.
And my point on that is that you do sort of user acceptance testing of these things, and we would like to come and make sure that, as you are all obviously users of this, that you do think that you're able to find what the key metrics are in that, whether that's with Lauren or with any of you that are interested. I'm just making an offer that we are very happy to do that.
Well, we thank you for the offer, and we will take you up. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Ahmed.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Deputy Mayor. Good morning, Kenny. Could you tell us, Deputy Mayor, what specific actions will be included in the new police and crime plan to address any increasing levels of crime? And what, over the life of the, and what I mean, you've given us as your reaction in terms of comments that have been made about the present plan. Do you want to spend any time just talking about any of the positives from that?
Yeah, thank you, Assembly Member Ahmed. I think it's really important that we do talk about the positives in the present, because there are real important ones, especially things like a 9% reduction in homicide. With violence against injury, 14% reduction in homicide. Lethal barrel discharge, which is obviously very terrifying, is down 27%. Residential burglary is down 12%. And theft from motorcycle vehicles is also down 10%. I think it's also really important that we talk about how much, for me, I think it's really important that we've had support for over 94,000 children and young people, especially as well as their families, through things like the parent and care and champion networks. I think, as I mentioned previously, the work that we've done to divert young children away from crime through really positive opportunities, which there's direct work through the mentoring of the VRU, but also wider work through the GLA on creating opportunities for young people. I think the work, the globally recognised work that the Mayor's done on tackling violence against women and girls, and Mayor having a really clear narrative on, the importance of tackling misogyny at all levels. So whether that be the very successful MAKE campaign or the toolkit recently released into schools. I also think some of the work that they've done on community cohesion is really important through the Shared Endeavour Fund, the work that has really made sure that there's important conversations about connection and community cohesion. So I think it's really good that the plan has looked beyond, it's not just about policing, it's about how do we make sure that we're preventing crime, how do we make sure that the crime's being enforced, how do we make sure that we're supporting victims through improving trust and confidence in the police, but also how do we make sure that we're reducing reoffending through tackling and improving the criminal justice system. So, and you'll see that in the new plan as well, that it's a whole system approach to making sure that we're doing everything in our power to keep Londoners safe.
And as the Chair quite rightly said, the new plan was published yesterday evening, quite late in the evening, and I certainly haven't had a chance to look at it. But could you tell us in that plan what specific actions will the plan be taking to address levels of crime with issues such as robbery, burglary and theft?
Yes, I mean, a lot of the we can talk about what we're going to do now, but I think it's really important that obviously at the last meeting we talked about things like the robbery partnership. You know, we talked about the round tables we've had with phone companies to make sure that we're using everything in our tech arsenal to reduce theft. Also, the work that some trial BCUs are doing to work on robberies. As I mentioned previously, it's great to be with Assemblyman Berdesai in Stratford and see firsthand, and the Mayor was so impressed with what we told him that he came back to Stratford to see it himself, you know, innovative thinking about how we can really build partnerships with localities. And I think the Home Office's priority really aligns with us in focusing on that neighbourhood policing, getting that neighbourhood policing back. I'm confident that if we can work together positively with us in that respect, that we can see real movement in the prioritisation of high volume crimes like shoplifting and theft. But I think it's also really another area that I want to really make sure that we're continuing to drive, because at the moment it's at epidemic levels, is the VOG space. I think once again, you know, from prevention, the work we're doing with perpetrators, we need to keep on going. That's something that I've spoken to the Minister about, how we make sure that that's a resource that is ring-fenced because it's in the prevention space. Similarly, you know, making sure that victims have access to support after their crime. The work that we do with Operation Soteria, which has now, it was started in London in the Met, is now a nationally rolled out programme, and we're seeing real you know, key results in that, and it's really important. And also, and very importantly, in that criminal justice space, at the moment, women are waiting 4 years to have their court case heard. We need to see rapid improvement on that. It's something that I've been talking to the CPS a lot about, and I think that, you know, getting a DA court hopefully will, you know, mean that we can get real movement in that thing. We need to make sure that there's that enforcement of that violence, like to get the whole system moving and making sure that women and girls get the thing that they need. And also, very importantly, knife crime. We are going to be working, obviously, once again, with the Labour government to make sure that, you know, we're really a key part of them halving knife crime. We already do a lot of work in this area, but we need to make sure that, you know, young people feel like they have a different choice in life, and that we're doing all we can with companies that, you know, especially in the online space, around, you know, buying online knives, especially of the worst kind. So I think there's so much potential in what we're going to do. You'll see that in the new plan, and, you know, we'll, you know, continue to talk to you throughout that. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and for mentioning Operation Bluestone Soteria, which is a Met good news story, which I think we should be singing from the rooftops about, because it is such a good initiative from the Met that, as you say, has been taken up nationally. So you alluded to the issue of the cost of living crisis. You've talked about certain crimes. Given that the national spike in theft-related crime has been recognised nationally as being due to the cost of living crisis, is MOPAC and the Met collaborating with other police services to develop practices to combat this trend?
I mean, short answer is yes, definitely. I've already been to one meeting with the Home Office and the mayors and my equivalents up and down the country for us to talk about this. I know there's another one scheduled coming up. So yes, this is something that we'll be continually working on. It's a key area for us, and it touches on, you know, a lot of the things we talked about, and also builds on some of the positive things that, you know, in collaboration we've been really successful in on things like clear, hold, build. So a whole holistic partnership community response to tackling entrenched issues.
And clear hold builds is something that is being it is in two of the estates in Lambeth, which I've been speaking to local officers about, and the community are very, very positive about it. So, you know, let's watch this space, because it seems as if it has a lot of results, and we've heard that across London as well. Deputy Mayor, homicide, as you say, has decreased. Firearm discharges has decreased by 28%. During the current police and crime plan, what factors do you believe have contributed to this reduction, and what measures are being implemented in the new plan to continue this progress?
I mean, I think there's obviously been a myriad. I think, you know, when you look at lethal barrel discharge, actually one of the things that I was talking to the Commissioner about the other day was actually the increase in sentencing around that offence. He believes that that's had a real positive impact. I think as well, the partnership work that's been done in all of our areas on tackling, trying to tackle violence reduction. Also, I have to say, I think it's really important to recognise the NHS in this space, not only to being open to things like we've commissioned, like Red Thread, and having, you know, and the evaluation I mentioned earlier about having youth-based workers there, but also, you know, obviously their relentless work to keep, sadly, victims of harm safe.
Thank you. Could you tell us why the positive outcomes for domestic abuse, hate crime and knife crime have dropped, and how MOPAC is going to support the Met to increase the number of positive outcomes for these offences?
Thank you. I mean, I think what we're seeing in VORG at the moment across the world is terrifying. I think a lot of that obviously needs to be understood, and I'd say the same about hate crime in the rhetoric we're seeing. That's why I mentioned the work we will be doing on online space. I think that's key to this, making sure that we're having positive conversations primarily with young men, having positive conversations and actually using young people as, champions of healthy relationships and positive conversations about difference is really important. So I think that that's something really, to understand. I think what we're seeing around violence against women and girls is obviously terrible, and all forms of against violence of women and girls, and it's something that the last few weeks it's been the 16 days of action, and it's been a real honour for me to go out to our gateway service to hear directly from those workers about what they're hearing on the lines in terms of sexual violence, rapes, also to see the pilot work we're doing to get legal aid to victims of violence against women and girls. And actually that's really going, it's a pilot, it's starting new, but already it's really, the lawyers there were talking about the positive referrals they're getting from the police now, and how well that's progressing. And it's really important because it's not only legal advice about their case, but also how they've been treated as victim survivors. So, there's a lot, and also the culturally appropriate work that we're doing through RISE. I met the brilliant Ladies Club, who are based in Leytonstone. Young Ladies Club, isn't it? Oh, in Leyton, and they're doing amazing work to raise black women, empower black women, make them understand, what a positive relationship can be. So, it's definitely holding the commissioning we're doing in that space and driving it forward. But I think, as I've said previously, that we have to take a system-wide approach in the area that I think in the Vorg space I most want to grapple with is the criminal justice space, because I think there's so much we need to do in there in terms of improvement to make sure that it's clear to perpetrators that their actions have consequences, and also to reduce the reoffending in that space that we know sadly has an evidence base around increasing in violence. I think similarly on extremism and hate crime, you know, I think we need to do more. It's been a real honour to get to work with Deputy Mayor Debbie Bernard Weeks, who's doing a lot of work in this space to bring communities together, to have positive conversations about what they're experiencing. But, you know, we know that hate crime is on the rise, and you know, we're seeing a polarity in the online space and a lot of misinformation. We sadly saw that in some of the riots, so there's a lot we need to do there. You know, I was at the contest board the other day talking about counter-extremism, counter-terrorism. We know that that's a key area of focus, and that's something that I think that we need to really look at and make sure that we have the most forward-looking approach to that area.
And what about knife crime?
Oh, yes, of course, sorry. I was so passionate about it. Yes, absolutely, knife crime. I think, you know, as I've mentioned previously, we need to, you know, make sure that those kind of knives, all kinds of knives, you know, something I worked in Islington was make sure that traders had the opportunity to be no knife shops, you know. So from this, you know, from the ordinary high street to the online space, we need to take knives off our streets, in my opinion, and we need to make sure we're doing everything we can to make sure that primarily young people aren't being exploited or having access to these weapons. But we also, I mean, I think as well, we need to really work in that exploitation space. I'm conscious that we've done amazing work for young people, giving them lots of mentoring, lots of positive opportunities, but we also need to look at the people that are putting the knives in those young people's hands. And, you know, something that me and the Commissioner have talked about is the upcoming bill that looks at actually having exploitation of children and young people as its own offence in this space, and I think that that's a really brilliant key loophole that the government have found. And you know, I'm conscious that I'm going to be really pushing that there's serious sentencing alongside that offence, because you know, exploitation of children is disgusting in my opinion, and we need to make sure we're doing all we can to close that off.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just as a reminder, volume of total knife crime has increased by 24%. Going on, if you could, I know you're passionate about some things, and I accept that, and we all are, being on this committee, but if you could try and narrow your answers to the questions put in, only because we've obviously under time restraints. Assembly Member Garbett.
Hello, morning to you both. I'm going to be asking some questions around victim support, which I know you've touched on a bit already. But from the data that we've been provided with, obviously there's been just, shocking kind of decrease in support for victims, like their satisfaction and investigation. And I just think it's, you know, from what I've heard from the Victims Commissioner as well, there's kind of a lot to do in this space. And obviously we know how important supporting victims is in, you know, not re-traumatising them, but also increasing that trust and confidence. So I wondered what evaluation MOPAC's done of current victim support services and what your findings have been.
Thank you, and it's been a real honour to work with our Victims Commissioner, and her passion in this area has been, you know, especially, you know, for how long she's been doing it. She's a real force, and the things that she's taken from conversations with victims to legislation has been really inspirational to me. I think that we, you know, need to continue to focus on this, and the reason that you're completely right, that the victim's experience throughout, from the time it happened, the initial response by the Met, you know, through the criminal justice system, and also understanding the outcomes that come from those things. And what I will say also, what I've really noted from the conversations I've had around victim survivors is the communication and how important that is on their cases. You know, a lot of the caseworkers that I was talking to who work in the Borg space were talking about how they are holding these women who are obviously, you know, it's really difficult to access other services. You know, the issues are, you know, from mental health to housing. There's a lot going on there for them, as well as their case. So I think we really need to push to make sure that we're improving the communication throughout the system with victim survivors. On the evaluation part, I think maybe Kenny can come in on the specifics.
No, that's fine. I mean, so all our evaluations are published on our website, and again, we can provide links and everything to that. But we've done LVWS, Survivors Gateway, Lighthouse, and our violence exploitation services. I think that's all fed into then when we've done our recent commissioning, or the newly commissioned London Victim and Witness Service, which actually is 4 individually commissioned service and a kind of new ecosystem approach. And why have we done that? I think because the learning that we took from that was actually it's important to tailor the services as far as possible to individual communities and the different needs that they have, and make sure that they actually are responded to as individuals, just rather than seeing victims as a monolithic block. Now, why do I say that in particular? If you look at the data, now we do user satisfaction survey, and one of the questions we ask in that is, would you describe yourself as being vulnerable at the time that the crime was committed against you? Now, actually, the least satisfied come out of that survey are the people who do identify as being vulnerable and then say that they didn't get any sort of tailored response. The people who are most satisfied, on the other hand, and this is about 79% of people or something, if I've got that number wrong, I'll correct it, are the people who do identify as vulnerable and then who do then feel that the police and the other services where their vulnerability was actually taken account of. They felt listened, heard, and they felt that something was done to them. So that's why when we've done these evaluations and when we've got that data, we have tried to tailor these services to make them as individually responsive as we possibly can.
Some of the data that we've seen shows that victim satisfaction is disproportionately negative for those who identify in an equality group, so disabled or LGBTIQ plus Londoners. So what is the approach you described to target that experience specifically?
So that's exactly the idea, that people, I mean, that is, we need to understand whether it is that protected characteristic itself which is driving it, or whether it's something else. Now, I suspect with disabled Londoners, when we've spoken to them, they do feel that the services aren't specifically tailored to them. They feel that not just as a victim, but they feel that often when they report hate crime, when they report these things. So that is exactly the sort of stuff that we'll be looking to address, yes.
And then back to you, Deputy Mayor. I was going to say, because I've been asking lots of questions about the experience of disabled Londoners. I asked the Met Commissioner recently, and I was a bit concerned that he said that there's no actual action plan written down. He said that there's some actions and people are aware of them, but there's no action. You know, and we know that from the Casey review found disableism, we know that disabled officers experience have disproportionately poor experiences, and obviously this around victims. And I just wonder what your thoughts are on having a kind of action plan about making disabled Londoners' experiences better.
I mean, I think that that's a very positive suggestion. I think that's something that we should, interrogate. And I mean, I think as well, it's just really important for us to, make sure that we're having continual engagement with that community and really listening to them and making sure that we're reflecting their experiences and their suggestions and solutions on how to improve things. I had a roundtable meeting with some LGBTQ plus organisations yesterday, and I was really grateful for their insight, their honesty about their experience of crime and safety. Everything from older members of their community not feeling like they can go out after dark to, how they experience the Metropolitan Police. And I do think we need to make sure that in everything we do, that we're making sure that all of those under the legislation with protected characteristics have thought about. But I think it's also we're going to be drafting our engagement plan in the new year, and I think it's really, you know, what I really reflected from the conversation yesterday is it cannot be a conversation about a one-off thing. It needs to be a continual way of, you know, people being engaged and having these conversations. What was really positive about that meeting is I heard the CPS are doing some brilliant work in this area with that community. So I'm really excited to look into that more and see what we can replicate.
That sounds really positive, and it's great to hear that you want to hear the voices of disabled Londoners, because that's a bit that I was really pushing the Met Commissioner on. So it was Inclusion London who've done lots of work on that, so I'll share that with you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Assembly Member Moema.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Deputy Mayor. Good morning, Kenny. I just wanted to ask you, off the back of that, if you could let us know anything specifically about MOPAC's effort to support the Met in commitments to taking a child-centred approach. That's been an issue over a number of years, from vulnerability in dealing with young people and children when they come into contact, right the way through to kind of their journey through the criminal justice system.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, at the last meeting here we talked about the children's strategy and taking a child-first approach. That's something that was also discussed. We had a long session at the London Policing Board where Officer Southall, I think, came and gave a long description about how he's taking, you know, as you said, from first ever contact with the police right through to, you know, sadly when they're detained, how we can really talk about safeguarding in that, thinking about children as children throughout, how we tackle entrenched issues around adultification, and, you know, really it's something that I think, you know, I've been passionate about in terms of the Met, but also as MOPAC, like how are we looking at this in everything that we do. So I mentioned earlier the contest board. I think there's a lot we need to do for young people around counter-extremism, around neurodiversity. You know, there's lots of ways that, and the work that the Violence Reduction Unit have done on inclusive education. You know, we need to, Kenny used the word ecosystem earlier, and I really think that that's, you know, really important. In the work we were talking about, shoplifting, theft, we know that the demographics around particularly phone snatch is a younger cohort. So what are we doing? You know, one of the positive suggestions in one of the Home Office's meeting is, do we build on the clear hold build approach, but make sure that education is a key partner in that? And I think that that's a really positive suggestion. I know Kenny's been working on this piece of work, so he's desperate to come in.
I would welcome your response, but before you do, I just wanted to add also, it'd be really helpful to hear also work that is being done to support the police or to monitor the police around child sexual exploitation. It's an area that they have not been particularly good at over a period of time, and that's obviously one of the most alarming crimes for members of the public to be aware of, but primarily for that child as a victim.
Yeah, so just to build very quickly on the answer that the Deputy Mayor gave, we also had Professor Neil Hazel, who is the sort of foremost expert in child first principles, come and we had him in, then we introduced him to the Met. And actually a lot of what he said was taken on board by the Met, and the Met worked very closely with our children and young people's team in that. So I do think that the children's strategy is a really good example of the Met, MOPAC, and working together and bringing in of external expertise. In terms of criminal and sexual exploitation, we obviously commissioned HMICFRS to come in and look at that. You'll know that as a result of that, there was the 2 accelerated causes for concern, and then there was a further cause of concern which came out off the back of that. HMICFRS have been in doing a series of sprints and a sort of re-inspection of that at the moment. I can't tell you exactly what the outcome of that is. I think they're only doing the hot debrief with the Deputy Commissioner, in fact possibly now, possibly at some point today. So hopefully, and obviously that is another one of the reasons that they are engaged. So hopefully in January at some point we will be able to say more about that, but we certainly look at caseloads and stuff like the Kate teams, all of those things, to actually understand what's going on and make sure that the officers have manageable caseloads and things like that.
And so before you share that with us, that background data, is that something you could share with the committee as well?
Yeah, I don't see why we shouldn't be able to.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Assembly Member Lord Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. The Police and Crime Plan 25-29. Hold on, I'm reading the wrong question. No. Sorry, yeah, I'm reading the one above. The Police and Crime Plan 22-25 has not achieved its desired outcomes to increase trust and confidence in the Met. Why not?
I mean, I think we need to acknowledge, as you all have when you accepted the recommendations of the Casey review, the deep scale of the issue here. I think that obviously the new Met for London plan is something that the Commissioner stands fully behind, is something that he's prioritised repeatedly. I think there's obviously a lot of work to do internally and externally. I think that the work that MOPAC has been doing about really drilling down as to what works in terms of trust and confidence. I believe there's 9 areas that they've identified that puts this shift in trust and confidence, and that ranges from positive communication to positive outcomes on cases. So that's something that we need to continue to focus on. But I really, once again, speaking to the members of the LGBTQ Q plus community yesterday, trust and confidence again was a key issue there. So I think we need to continue to be relentless in that area. That's why it is a, once again, key priority in the new plan, and we need to make sure that for the Met as a workforce, but also for all Londoners, that we get to have improved trust and confidence in the police. I believe the statistics, but Kenny might be able to correct me or give more insight, is that trust and confidence is now stabilising. It's no longer declining. Obviously that's not good enough, but it's hopefully some progress on the long road to improving that.
We can all agree that there's work to be done, but the question I'd ask is, what is MOPAC doing? Because my observation would be MOPAC, in the form of the former Deputy Mayor, she's not here to defend herself, has always made it up the police's problem, and it is. But from our point of view, that MOPAC could be more effective in helping the police turn around that problem, because that is part of your role. So what are you going to do that's different in any way, and how will that manifest itself in the plan to help the police move forward? Because the police changing the dial on this is not something they can do alone.
Thank you, Lord Bailey, and I recognise that. I think the work that we've been doing through the London Policing Board has really started to be key to that. The positive work that I've seen in the last meeting around the children's strategy, the work that we're going to be looking at the next meeting around stop and search. Actually, I think I was really impressed with the officer who's leading that work, who has taken a very community-led focus in that, and I think it's for me, my approach will always be clarity of what we're doing and why. I think we're looking, the Casey review noted the relationship between MOPAC and the Met. That's something I'm keen that we grapple with. It's something that I know the CEO of MOPAC is working on currently.
Sorry to interrupt you. You talk about the relationship between MOPAC and the Met. So how useful do you think it was when people from MOPAC were releasing statements about the Chris Cabba case that police officers in particular were hugely disappointed with? Do you think that would help with trust and confidence?
I mean, as I was about to say, Lord Bailey, I think our role is to support the Met, use our, the work that we're doing, the pilots that we're able to run, to the information we're able to work with the Met on, to support them. But it's also, it has to be a critical friend. It has to challenge where they have concerns, and be, use its insight. Use also, once again, the connection that it has with Londoners to make sure that that voice is heard. I don't think we should, it wouldn't be oversight if we never had anything, if we only said positive things.
But it also, one could argue, isn't oversight if you use it to express opinion that destroys trust and confidence, and in many people's estimation, mine included, was entirely the wrong thing to do.
Sorry?
People from your organisation expressed an opinion on a highly controversial case that was the complete opposite of building trust and confidence. You have said that it isn't correct for you to only say positive things, which I entirely agree on, but I would suggest it isn't correct to do what was done in the way in which it was done. What will change, or will it change now that you're the Deputy Mayor? If that situation happens again in the future, we have a highly controversial case, could we expect a comment such as what came from MOPEC last time, or you as Deputy Mayor not allow that to happen?
I mean, I know that we look at, very controversial cases involving the Met, often. I mean, I met with AC Lawrence Taylor the other day to talk about the vetting process, the work that he's been doing in that area to improve standards and professionalism, and I think that that's really important. And I think that the work that MOPAC does around audit, we do a lot of work in making sure.
Respect, Deputy Mayor, that's an entirely different subject arena to the one I'm addressing. We're talking about trust and confidence in the Met. I'm talking about something that MOPAC, very senior people at MOPAC did, release statements about the Chris Cabot case which were entirely unhelpful. I'm asking you, do you think that's useful in building trust with the Met, and would you allow that to happen again now that you are the Deputy Mayor for Policing?
I mean, obviously, I wasn't the Deputy Mayor for Policing then. I do think integrity and, having positive ways of challenging, and we have that through our governance structures, is the most appropriate way of doing that.
But that was outside of your governance structure?
Understood.
Okay, thank you. Chair?
Thank you. Assembly Member Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. As part of the Trust and Confidence piece in September 2022, the Commissioner pledged that officers would attend all London burglary reports. And data from 2023 shows that there was a significant increase, which is very welcome. How can you tell us about the performance on that metric for 2024? Has it stayed the same? Or now that the spotlight's slightly gone off it, has performance dropped?
So I don't have the exact figure in front of me, but the last time I looked at this, I think performance was still very high, around about 89%, because or something like that. I can get you the exact figures, but the last time I looked, it wasn't that the performance had dropped off because the spotlight had moved elsewhere.
Those figures would be useful, maybe on the sort of a quarterly basis. That would be helpful to have. Thank you.
Yeah, very happy to write quarterly with that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just before we end this, can I point out that the data on domestic, non-domestic and teen homicide has not been updated on the Met's homicide victims dashboard since March, you're nodding, 2024, or on MOPAC's PCP dashboard since January 2024. You're nodding, Kenny. So what's the reason?
I think there's just been a few data issues, I believe, which is linked to the Connect transfer, but I will get you more specifics on that if you would like, Chair.
It's nearly a year. Yeah. Is it good enough? Oh, Deputy Mayor, I'm sorry, I should ask you, is this good enough?
I mean, I think, as has been said a number of times in this committee, your access to the most up-to-date data is really important, and we need to make sure that we're doing that, so that's something we'll take away.
Okay, I think the words I was looking for is no, it's not good enough, but let's hope things do start to improve. I see now we have a new guest, Amana Humayan, I hope I pronounced that correctly, who's actually going to help with the next section, which is on budget submission. So Assembly Member Roberts is starting on that one.
Thank you, Chair. Question for the Deputy Mayor first. We are expecting to have the police and MOPAC budget meeting early next year. All of our panel guests have accepted. The only person who has yet to accept is the Police Commissioner. Do you think that he should accept?
I do, and I think he will.
We've not had an official response back. Would you be able to write to him asking him to attend?
Yeah.
Thank you. The second question is that the forecast overspends in the MOPAC budget in 2024 to 2025, do those overspends affect your confidence in the ability to reduce MOPAC and the VRU's expenditure in future years?
I think this is a really important question. I think it's something that there are very live conversations about. I think, you know, the conversation that I've been having with the Chief Exec related to the new plan is, you know, making sure that we're clear on our priorities, you know, making sure that we have a long-term 3-year forecast for our budgets. And, you know, I come from local government, so I'm used to driving efficiencies that make sure that we are, you know, being fiscally responsible. And it's been really positive to work with Amana on the current budget, but there's work to be done, and we're on it.
Amana? You are. Oh.
No, you're not.
No, you're not. There we go.
Am I on? Okay, thank you. If I may, could I just give a response to the point about the Commissioner attending the meeting in January, please? So Kaya and I have received our letters, and in those letters it has the full cast that's been invited. Yes. And actually the Commissioner was not on the original invite list, so the invitees from the Met are Dan Worsley, the new CFO, and Claire Davis, I forgot her surname for a moment, who's the People and Resources Officer. I believe it was at a previous meeting, perhaps of the PCC, that Assembly members requested the Commissioner be invited. Apologies, it wasn't. It was when the GLA CFO was in front of the Budget and Performance Committee. Only at that meeting, most recently, was it requested that the Commissioner attend. So his invite didn't go as part of the standard set of invites that have come to myself, to Kaya, to Dan and to Claire. So I think it's a later invitation. And I'm not aware that he's received it yet. So I just want you to know that he hasn't been invited as part of the standing invitation. I think it was a subsequent decision to have him invited. And he didn't attend last year.
No, that's not my understanding from the conversation we had the other day. However, that's not for here.
And if I come in on the overspend point.
Please.
So the forecast overspend specifically for MOPAC, excluding the VRU, is 0.1, so it's 100k, and for this financial year, and we believe that will be mitigated before the end of this financial year. The VRU are actually forecasting a minor underspend of 200 to 300k, which obviously offsets the MOPAC marginal overspend. You are right that in years 2 and 3 of the medium-term financial plan that was published in November, there is a forecast deficit for years 2 and 3 of that MTFP. But there are a number of decisions to be made about services that we contract, where actually services will, contracts will expire before those financial years, and actually by not renewing those services and making other termination decisions about other services, we'll be able to manage that forecast deficit.
Can you give us some sort of flavour as to what type of services will not be renewed or cut?
Well, no decisions have yet been made.
Indeed.
So, and that's largely because Kaya is relatively new, and we haven't yet presented to her a catalogue, almost a menu of the sorts of services that she might want to consider. And it won't necessarily have to be termination. It could just be service reduction and changing the scope of services.
Okay, I think the Deputy Mayor, were you beckoning to come in? No, that's fine. Thank you very much for your answer.
Okay, there seems to be some confusion about this letter. This letter apparently, obviously I'm only relaying, apparently the letter normally only has the people on it that's sent to you that have agreed to attend. So it could well be that that letter didn't have the Commissioner on it because he hadn't responded. It's believed that the Commissioner was invited, but we'll take that away and look at it. It's absolutely vital. I'm a member of the Budget Committee, and so is my colleague. It's absolutely vital that the Commissioner comes to answer this, because the reductions in his budget may cause London real problems, and we need to be hearing from that. Assembly Member Best.
Thank you, Chair. And just, I suppose, on another quick interlude from the budget, Kaya, I saw you posted about going to your first London Policing Board meeting where you were graced with the presence of the Commissioner. So could I follow up on, I know having just talked as well about having the Commissioner at our next meeting, you did say that you would write. Did you send that letter and have you had a response, or have you had that conversation verbally?
So I have spoken to the Met about this issue because I know that it was something that all the members were exceptionally clear on at my last meeting. I spoke to Deputy Commissioner Lynn Owens about it, and she accepted the strength of feeling of the committee. So, I really want to say that because I was exceptionally clear on how passionate you were that that was, understood, and she has committed to ensuring that the Met are meeting their commitments that they made to this committee, as outlined in the letter to the chairman, I believe, in July. So she's taken that way as an action to review and to drive forward in the new year.
Can I interrupt? Do you mind? Why can't Lynn Owens come? In the past, I've been on this committee for years, we've had the deputy here more often sometimes than the Commissioner. Why can't she come?
My understanding, and apologies, Chair, obviously I've not been here for the whole history of this, is that there was an exchange of letters, I believe, between yourself and Lynn in July, and an agreed commitment was agreed through those letters, and on that basis she's going to review the commitment and make sure that she's holding to that commitment.
Well, I've written to the Commissioner, I'll write to her, because we'd be more than happy to have her. She's a very experienced officer. She's done some incredible things in the past. We all have a relationship with her, and we'd be very happy to see her, but we do need the Met to attend these meetings. I can't tell you, every time you mention the London Policing Board, the hackles go up on every one of us, because it's all very well for you to all attend that, but this is the meeting. This is what we are paid to do. And people, yes, elected, you're quite right, Lord Bailey, elected to do. And, we can't do our job properly when we haven't got a police officer in present. Anyway, sorry, Assembly Member Best.
If I may, as I said previously, I understand the strength of feeling. I also understand your democratic accountability. That is something that I passed on. She was saying that in the letter that there was agreement around thematic meetings and also a range of officers attending, including herself and the Commissioner. But also, I know this is something that Assembly Member Desai said to me last time, that a mix of officer might be appropriate, because especially on the operational side, you may have questions on that.
We all agree on this, and this is the first time, this last few years, the first time ever. Before, it was we always had an officer to ask questions on, and we had one, Matt Twist. Incredible. And he answered questions. So we're vexed about something. He gave us a reason the police weren't doing it. We were all happy, cross-party. So, there is a benefit to the police coming, but we're all getting mighty fed up that they don't. Apologies, Assembly Member Best. We'll carry on. You can come.
I was just saying that the attendance of the police also helps the Deputy Mayor, because they come with an operational knowledge, far more detailed knowledge of operational practices on the ground than you possibly have.
We need to move on because of time reasons, but you can tell the strength of feeling completely cross-party. Assemblymember Best.
Thank you. But the reason I think it's important to bring up, Kyra, is because every time I go to question you, I want you to know, I think a little bit to what Assemblymember Desai was saying, is that those questions you're getting thrown, that should be going somewhere else. And that's in itself not fair on you. And we want to be fair in our scrutiny of what you should be asked and what is outside of your remit. But with that in mind, talking about the budget and obviously the forecasted overspend, what for this year? What sort of mitigations are you looking at? What mitigations do you want to see MOPAC taking?
I mean, I know that Amana addressed the overspend, and I hope the committee are assured that by the end of the year that there will be a balanced budget. But as I said previously, going forward, I think it's continually important that we make sure that we are living within our means, if you will, and that we're also, making sure that we know, as a system, what our priorities are, how using the evaluation and insight team to make sure that we're robust in what we're doing and why, and make sure that the spending is effective in that area.
But in practical terms, what does that look like to you on a day-to-day basis?
Obviously working with the Chief Exec and the CFO and the rest of the board to make sure that decisions that we're taking around commissioning are the right decisions, they have a strong evidence base, that we're looking at workforce spend, that we're looking at, every area of the budget and making sure we have the right controls around that. I know that, weekly I'm taking decisions on behalf of both MOPAC and the Metropolitan Police Service around procurement, around spend, around pensions, and I'm very grateful to Amana that I can ask those questions, scrutinise those questions, making sure that we're making prudent financial decisions.
May I come in? Just to stress again that the forecast overspend this financial year for MOPAC is 100k. That's less than 0.2% of the overall spend. I'm confident, given the scale of the MOPAC budget, it's quite common in finance to see a level of optimism about the organisation's ability to spend in the course of the financial year. And often I find the conversations I'm having with my peers like Kenny and my team are having with the rest of the organisation is to really test that optimism and say, come on now, are you really going to spend this money that you say you're going to spend? And you tend to see at the start of a financial year the forecast position as an overspend. And as you update your forecasts, as you get towards the year end, that overspend magically becomes an underspend. And actually that's what we've seen both in the Met financial position, where at the start of this financial year they were forecasting a 50 to 60 million overspend for this financial year, and as at the end of quarter two that had reversed into a 12 million underspend. Frustrating from a CFO's perspective, because I could almost have predicted that, and I see a similar trend, but obviously a much smaller scale in the VRU and MOPAC. I'm quite confident that by the time we report quarter three figures within MOPAC, you will see that 100k forecast overspend probably become a marginal underspend.
Thank you. And Kai, what discussions has the Mayor or MOPAC had with the Home Office and MOJ on the future of grant funding?
We've had several discussions with the Home Office. I think, I want to put on record my thanks to this committee for the lobbying that they've always done around the finances of the Met. I know particularly around the national and international cities grant. That's been something that you've been, stalwarts of campaigning recognition for. I know that's something that the previous government didn't take up, but I know that that's something that's really been heard by the Home Office. I mean, I I think that we have put in a lot of effort to make sure that that we've worked closely with the Metropolitan Police to make it sure that we have a really clear analysis of what is needed in terms of funding, a real analysis of the gap. We know that the Met has been underfunded by the equivalent of more than £1 billion, so it's a huge gap that we're trying to fill.
You're going to have to be careful with these sums now, because you understand it's a Labour government that aren't going to give you this money either, right? So I'm just saying, I mean, just to hark back to some of the opening of this discussion, where you talked about some of the reasons for the crime increases, like the Mayor and yourself are going to have to start taking some responsibility. And I'm just saying, you're going to have to be careful banding around some of these figures, because there is a Labour government that are going to tell the Mayor, you're not getting that money.
Apology. Well, for me, I'm just giving context for the financial state that we're in currently. I think it's important. I know that Assembly members have been working on this for a long time, but obviously I know this meeting is broadcast. I think it's important that the context of the gap is given. In that context, I do think that, you know, we've been clear with the Home Office why London safety is important. It's national responsibilities and how that affects its finances. You know, obviously, on public protection alone, in the last few years, we've seen a significant financial pressure for the Met, and also the work.
We're talking about the MOPAC budget. We're talking about MOPAC as well, specifically.
Okay, apologies. Yeah, I mean, I think that the Mayor has invested. Increased his investment from 19% to 27% to make sure that we're doing all we can to tackle crime, and that's important because, you know, we can't police our way out of some of these crimes. So the work that MOPAC does to make sure that we're seeing support and reduction in key areas, especially prevention, is something that is important and is something that is reflected in the budget.
Agreed on prevention, right? But what you're saying isn't tallying up. We're seeing the MOPAC budget is falling, the Mayor's input is falling, and actually what I've asked you about is the conversations you've had with the Home Office around grants, because actually going back to that government that you've criticised before, that government you've criticised throughout this meeting are the ones that have given the grants that the MOPAC and the VRU have managed to use really well. And those grants are dropping off. So I've asked you, what conversations are you having with this government? Because you're going to lose things, for example, like the Drive Fund, which is really important for VORG. So what conversations have you had with the new government about those grants?
Thank you for your clarification, Assembly Member Best. I mean, specifically, I've had conversations around with ministers around money for the work that we're doing around, as I've mentioned, theft and shoplifting and neighbourhood policing. Essentially, as well, the work we've been doing.
But this is Met money, though. That's on the Met.
Sorry, but I may complete my answer. Also, specifically, the MOPAC's work that we're doing with perpetrators and how important that work is. That's something that I've spoken to Minister Phillips about. But you know, recognising that I've only been here since October, and so you know, I continue, and in that time we've had the overall budget to contend with, but I think Kenny and Amanda are keen to add.
So, as you'd expect, we've had lots of conversations with the government about this, particularly, so if we split it in two, if you like, on the Home Office side, the reality is that they need to get the police settlement done, which only came out yesterday. They then have about £1 billion off the top of that they are top sliced, don't they? And that's where a lot of the crime grants, if you want to call it that, come from. Now, we have stuff like Operation Soteria, which goes into the NPCC, but actually some of the staff are still MOPAC staff. You have some of that's where the VRU money comes from, etc., etc. So we are having lots of those discussions to push for clarity as soon as we can possibly get it. Obviously, I mean, I was around around when the coalition came in 2010. I was around when it was then Conservative majority thereafter. And I know every time that happens, it takes a little bit of time for that to happen. So hopefully by late January, February, there will be more clarity and we'll be able to say that to you. But at the moment, officials are still working that through. Obviously, on the MOJ side, there are different grants which come in particular, seen a small reduction in the victims one which came in, which will need to be reflected as we move forward. And again, there are discussions ongoing with the Ministry of Justice. In the normal way, their internal budgetary processes, having been in government, will probably be running up until about the same time as the Home Office's one. So again, hopefully in the new year, we'll have much greater clarity on all of this. But that's the kind of the norm, if I can put it that way.
Okay, thanks. I don't really have time for, but I just want to be clear. How much money are you expecting or wanting and asking for from the Home Office? Are you expecting that there'll be grants that will come in that will fund the gap, which MOPAC is currently forecast to lose in money? Are you asking for more grants? How much money?
I think the Chancellor has been exceptionally clear in the kind of direction of travel in what the Treasury is doing. So I think it would be counterproductive or naive to ask for an extension in our grants. I mean, I as mentioned before by Amana, we're working up proposals on where that money is best spent. I know that future grants, especially for commission services, is something that services has written to me about their concerns about that grant, and that's something that I've been passing on to the Home Office to reiterate the strength of feeling and the concern of the uncertainty of not knowing what the future spending is. But I'm not expecting an uplift.
I mean, but this is just like this is a pattern through every single GLA committee now, is where officers and deputy mayors would used to give us a very clear figure on what they'd be happy to ask government for. You now won't put a number on it, and it's really frustrating as a committee then to be able to look at that, and it appears nothing more than politics. Are you also going to ask the mayor to do more of the one-off funding that he did previously in the election year for MOPAC?
I mean, I know that the mayor has invested a lot of money in this area for a long time. I know it's one of his key priorities, and he's done that. I know that he's really stepped up.
No, but the question is, are you going to ask him to match that funding that he gave MOPAC in the election year?
Yes, the mayor does not have a slush fund, so the mayor has been able to give us allocations in the past for very specific purposes when the income that's generated by business rates has been better than expectation and better than currently forecast. So the returns from the various bodies across London are due to come in, I believe, at the end of January.
We know the process. We know he's going to get more money. I'm asking if you're asking for that, but
he won't necessarily get. Well, we've already assumed a level of income, but you're absolutely right. We will be putting to the mayor a series of options where we believe we need funding, and we understand though that he's got priorities across the GLA family.
Okay, just for clarity, the letter that you spoke about, Kaya, the Commissioner wrote, or the Deputy Commissioner note, I did respond to, as in with them coming, asking for the Deputy Commissioner and to reconsider their very poor offer, and I've had no response to that letter, which can't surprise anybody. So we're going to have to pick up speed a little bit. We're now going to talk about MOPAC budget submissions expenditure. So, Kaya, given the large planned reductions in MOPAC and the VRU's reserves, how does MOPAC plan to respond to overspends or income shortfalls in future years?
I mean, I know that reserves is obviously something that we always need to be prudent about and make sure we're making sensible decisions. My understanding is that a lot of the reserves were ring-fenced reserves, so that's why there's been a reduction in them. So they were already kind of earmarked for spend. in that light, and Amana will correct me if I'm wrong, but in that light, we shouldn't need to have that level of reserves because they were earmarked.
You're absolutely right. So our level of reserves are set to reduce. It's a constant balancing act. So if you look at our reserve position over the past 5 years or so, you'll see that for approximately 3 years, our reserves level went higher and higher and higher every year.
Yep.
And the criticism we got from external audit was that your reserves are too high. You need to draw down on them. As planned, because they were earmarked for specific areas of spend, they have been drawn down. In specific answer to your question, where we see underspends materialise in year, my advice to Kaya will be, rather than reallocate those underspends immediately, it will be to ensure that we replenish our general reserve. And so we do have that element of capacity. What I wouldn't want to do is to recommend to the Deputy Mayor that she increases the general reserve to an amount that I think may not be justifiable where there are services to Londoners that we should be providing and funding. So ensuring that we have a level of prudence and contingency whilst not maintaining a superfluous fund.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you can absolutely confirm to me that all the money that's coming out of the reserves are one-off payments. They're not something that require.
There is... No, actually, MOPAC reserves are being used to an extent to fund some services that we're providing to Londoners. And that was a decision that we made a number of years ago. So there will be some services that we either have to find other funding sources for, or should our reserves replenish, it's a decision for the Deputy Mayor if she still wishes to use reserves to fund those services. Or whether we identify savings from elsewhere in order to continue those services.
Yeah, because, I mean, obviously, but it's best if reserves are used for one-off payments, and then it doesn't have a knock-on effect on the budget. So clearly then that isn't the case, and they are funding services. So my question to you, Kaya, then is, obviously, given that, and given it's a vast amount of money, what services are in danger of being stopped? Because unless you can find that money from somewhere else, some things are going to have to stop.
I mean, I think we need to do a full review of that and make, Marna mentioned that the service is working up options. I think it's also making sure that, and taking prudent decisions about that. I think Amana's helpfully laid out the important balance of that. But I also think it's important that we make sure that, if we can't fund it, there's a sustainable plan, an exit plan for those commission services, if it's that, or, what are partners doing in that space to help support in that area?
I know that, and I'm sure you know that as a leader of a council, but equally, you must have an idea on what you might have to stop. We're not talking about a few quid, we're talking about millions. So what might you have to stop if you can't find that money from somewhere else? You must have an idea of what is in danger, because you can't suddenly just turn a tap off in many of these things, especially if they're services. So what's on your desk that you may have to stop?
If I could come in, and nothing's on Kai's desk at the moment because we have a fully balanced budget for 25-26, and we don't expect to implement any sort of service reduction or scope in the course of the next financial year. We are now working at haste to present to the Deputy Mayor a series of risk-assessed options, and I'm sure if I ask each of you the sorts of things we should take into account when considering whether to continue a service or stop a service, everyone will have a slightly different view on the sorts of criteria we should take into account. So that is being presented, but Assembly Member Hall, in response to your question, I believe nothing is really out of scope at this stage in terms of what we potentially put to the Deputy Mayor for her to consider for the 26-27 financial year, but we're still over 12 months away from that.
No, I'm mindful of that, but equally you can't stop services just, bluntly. It's a subject we'll have to come back to because it's so important and so worrying for so many of these services that are funded through MOPAC. But because of time, we'll move on. So Assembly Member Garbett.
Thank you. This has been very interesting. I'm going to ask a bit about the reduction in VRU funding, because given the context of us talking about performance this morning, we've seen data on the hospital admissions for under 25s and knife violence for injury for under 25s increasing. So this is the context of which I'm asking this question. Also, the police and crime plan, the new one, states that this area is a top priority for the mayor. I'm really concerned about the VRU reduction. In the submission, it shows that the VRU fund forecast goes down from 30.3 million this year as outturned to 19.3 in 27 to 28, which is a huge reduction in funding. So I wanted to ask, why are we seeing a proportionally large reduction in the budget for the VRU as part of the MOPAC funding?
I mean, Amanda will come in on the detail, but my understanding is because obviously the VRU get funding from ourselves, but also from Home Office. So those forecasts are partly based on projections of what might likely be the case from Home Office, but we wouldn't put it in our plan if it wasn't a priority, and it's something that I know I meet with Liv Peck, the director of VRU, every week. It's something that we have continual conversations. It's something that we're obviously both very passionate about. It's that prevention space, and I think as well the work that we're doing across the GLA to look at how we support children and young people overall should be considered in this space. But Amanda, do you want to come in?
You are right that total expenditure for the VRU is forecast to reduce, and that's because there are some specific programmes that are coming to an end. And I think, apologies, one of the Assembly members has previously cited some of those. There was one-off mayoral funding of £6.5 million that's due to come to an end by the end of 25-26, and also some government grants, which were always due to end as decided by the previous government, and we have not yet heard by the current government as to whether they will be replenished. We expect to hear by end of February.
Yeah, because I think that's a pretty terrifying drop, isn't it, of basically a third. And I think my question is this going to impact the mayor's commitment to deliver 500,000 opportunities for young people? I guess that's a question for Deputy Mayor, because obviously this is a huge part of the manifesto, and losing a third of the funding, I just wondered if that's going to impact on that, or if that was considered.
I mean, I think the short answer is definitely not. It's something that he's continually proud and prioritised. And as I said, I think it's important to understand that across the GLA family that we do things for children and young people. I know that you're rightly concerned about the targeted work we do for children at risk, and we're all passionate about that, but I think we need to take it in the round and make sure that it is a key priority. The mayor's signed off the plan, so he knows he stands behind that.
So just as a related follow-up, if the funding does continue, if it is as is written here, that it will be 19.3 by 27-28, do you think that's going to impact our ability to address violence experienced by young people?
I mean, Amanda, correct me if I'm wrong, that you have to make a budget based on the knowledge you have. So you have to make conservative, prudent, forecasts, because you can't, if a grant's coming to an end, you can't decide that the Home Office is going to continue it. So that's based on that. So I think we're talking about hypotheticals on hypotheticals, if you will. I can't say whether it will have the impact that we hope.
I guess it's asking if you're concerned about it, I guess, then is the question.
Oh, I mean, I will promise you I'm always concerned about children and young people, and I'm always concerned about budgets. I think we need to make sure that we are constantly working through these issues, working together, making sure that, as you've said, Assemblymember Garbett, that, we prioritise this, we know the reasons we prioritise this, and that we, champion that in our conversations.
Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of that section. We're now moving on to the HMI Peel report, Buildings Supporting and Protecting the Workforce. Questions will start with Assembly Lord Bailey.
Following the HMI...
Your microphone.
Oh, excuse me. Following the HMI CFRS PIL inspection, what indicators is MOPAC using to oversee the Met's measure the Met's progress in building and supporting protecting the workforce, its workforce?
I mean, I know that I'm conscious that Kenny will have the, particular details on that, but just to assure the committee that I've already met the inspector, the AC responsible for this piece of work, and that we've had really a long conversation and briefing about the importance of this work. I've also met with the HMIC to understand their current insight into this area. It was heartening to hear, and I'm sure the committee will agree, that the work that they've been doing to support the workforce, especially around support after a traumatic incident, is having real positive impacts. But it's something that we need to continue to make sure. I'm really struck that the workforce and the morale of the workforce and their ability to have psychological safety is exceptionally important. So it's something that I'm passionate about driving forward.
Just to cut
do you want to come through?
Because of time. So you use the word morale. Anybody who's met anybody in the Met Force will tell you that the morale is rock bottom and low. You talked about their ability to respond to a traumatic incident that officers involved in. I would argue they're slightly better at that than they are creating a conducive workplace. That's why I asked you a very clear question about what measures will you be pursuing, what KPIs, what performance indicators will you be wanting the Met to show you so that you can understand if they're creating a good place to work. I'll give you an example of that. The Met workforce planning has been terrible because the Met is under such pressure because of protests, etc., our capital city duties. It becomes really important. So, for instance, have you had a conversation with the Met about their workforce planning?
Yes, I have, definitely. I think as well, through the new Met for London plan, which obviously we have direct oversight, it's really important that, the infrastructure of the Met is considered, the capital estate of the Met is considered. There's been a lot of work that was described to me about mapping the Met, making sure they have a real clear insight to, who and where their workforce is, and making sure that, there are those conversations. Something that I'm keen to do in the new year is to meet with the police unions, meet with the Federation, get their insight as well, because we don't want to just hear from senior officers around workforce. It's something I know that, it's really important. It's also the triangulation of me going out, talking to officers, hearing from their experience about how they feel like we can't make assumptions about, what it's like to be in the Met. We need to hear directly from officers. So it's really important.
So can I say this to you, Deputy Mayor? So one of the themes of this meeting has been dashboards, and one of my criticisms of MOPAC is conversations. You have thousands of them. You love a meeting. People in MOPAC, in my humble opinion, think the meeting is the point of the job. What I want to know is, will you be building a dashboard so that you can satisfy yourself and others, as to what changes, measures the Met has made to increase the pleasure, the ability for its officers to operate? So you've had conversations around what they want to do. Great. How do you measure the outcome? Where is the measurable outcome? How can you say in a year's time, 2 years' time, that it's progressed or not?
If I may, Lord Bailey, I think one of the most clear, important measures of it is the work that the HMIC have done as an independent body. They're obviously got a robust, dashboard that they're working through in terms of they've recognised the positive progress that the Met has made, particularly around occupational health. But I'm having additional meetings with them in the new year to continue to interrogate that.
Yeah, but I agree with what you just said, but that's work that the HMFRC did. That will stop. how will MOPAC, when you come in the morning, how will you be able to say to your staff team, I think the Met are doing good or bad on a particular measure? Where is this information kept? Are you building a dashboard so you can satisfy yourself in MOPAC that this progress is being made, and you can push for it to go better, or you'll be satisfied?
I mean, Kenny will come in, but what I will say is, the Engage report is coming in the new year, and I think you're right, Lord Bailey, to push about, what is the plan post-Engage. And I think what we need to do, looking at those recommendations through that, is really have a key, post-Engage work that is supportive of the progress, hopefully, that is in that report, but also continually challenging, because, as I said, the health of the workforce is extremely important. Kenny?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, I suppose the Met, with its new CDI directorate, is working with us at the moment to come up with the indicators that the Met itself wants to use to measure how it's performing on culture. Culture is quite a difficult thing to measure within itself. We actually funded an audit to look at the sort of existing culture, diversity and inclusion projects to give them a baseline to work from. So that is exactly what you're talking about, Lord Bailey, in terms of being able to build that and understand how stuff's working. There are other metrics which I think are probably quite important as well. So one, they're going to run their staff survey, which will be the first time for a couple of years which they're doing that. Hopefully that will give us a level of granularity. There's other things you can look at, like where does attrition take place in particular. We know, for example, though, that 47% of all leavers from the Met, actually it happens within the first 4 years. So what are the sort of improvements that the Met can make to do that? How can they make it clearer to people when they're joining the police service exactly what that's going to entail? I mean, obviously you would expect a bit more attrition nowadays and historically because of the way careers have moved, etc. But what can we do with that? We look at what are the relationship between people applying, the people failing vetting, promotion, all of that sort of stuff. And if you start to see spikes in attrition in a certain team, or you start to see lots of people leaving certain teams, that probably does tell you it's a place that's actually going and worth having a proper look at the culture. We also know that in places where there's lack of supervision rates are very high.
Sorry to interrupt, Kenny. So what you're saying is the information does exist. What I'm asking for is, does MOPAC hold it in one place? Do you intend, because all of the things you've described are very, very serious things, many of which will take years to turn around, which means somebody should be looking at them the whole time. I'm asking, do you look at them the whole time? Do you have a dialogue with the Met to actually get those things changed?
Yeah, so that, I'm sorry, this is what I was trying to say, obviously, not clearly enough, apologies. That's the sort of discussion with the CDI, the new CDI team, which is now under a temporary AC, Rachel Williams, where they're pulling together all of the metrics. And what we are trying to do is work alongside the Met so that we are looking at shared metrics, if I can put it that way, because there's no point us looking at one thing, the Met looking at another. Agreed. And then us both giving you a completely different story because you'll think we're totally mad. So it's much better if we can have one shared version of what we're looking at and we understand why we're looking at that, and then we both work together to hold them to account for that.
And my last question, Deputy Mayor, is a very particular one about workforce planning. So recently, the Mayor of London failed to fill his recruitment quota, and the Labour government are talking about getting an extra 13,000 officers. I asked the Minister in charge what he would be doing to support the Mayor to achieve it this time, and he had no real answer for me. So I ask you what you'll be doing to support the Mayor to do that, because of course that has a massive knock-on effect for the welfare of the officers we already have. So I want you to look at that. And the other part to that question is, many years ago now, the Met went on a recruitment drive, and they succeeded. They got many officers at that point, but a huge amount of those officers are due to retire soon. Has anybody planned for that extra level of attrition that we'll see just through natural wastage? Is there someone looking at the figures enough to realise that you have a bubble coming and that you're going to do something about it? Or the Met, rather, than do something about it?
Yes, and I think it's something that we've definitely had a lot of conversations between our team and the Met's team through the budget conversation that we're working on at the moment. I think we know that for a number of reasons, recruitment, but also workforce is a challenging issue for the Met. And actually, we're now working through the financials of the settlement that was given yesterday. So I don't want to, presume anything about that. But the Mayor and the Commissioner came here and reflected the difficult choices that are likely in some of that. We're working that through. Recruitment is something that I've spoken to officers about, trying to understand the positive campaigns that have worked, the negative campaigns, but also I think we need to recognise in London that there's, for all, and it's something that came up at Mayor's Question Times around key workers and housing. There's a myriad of issues for workforces in London around the expense of it. And I know that the uplift is something that has been talked about, but it is challenging. And Kenny said that the retirement bubble is something that, the attrition bubble is something that's being looked at. If you want to add on that, Kenny.
I would just say, in terms of what we in MOPAC can do to promote, we did fund the outreach programme for the Met. I think there's more we can do in terms of promoting it's a good place to work, getting that out via the Mayor and Deputy Mayor, things like that. I think we can help the Met with their evaluation, understanding the channels, understanding who's more likely to go into policing and making sure that they focus their efforts properly. The other sort of linked point to that I would make, and it's not a pure officer numbers point, is I think we can do potentially more as well to help the Met in terms of civilianisation, because there's no point having all those officers if they then sit in a back office doing, I don't know, a random transformation programme or something, when actually you can have them out on the front line. So I think there's more we can do to help perhaps attract people with different skills into the Met, which actually, if you bring in somebody who's a qualified programme professional, maybe you can have one of them rather than two police officers working on them, and you can get them back out in the beat. And I think that's quite important in terms of how
that is, but it's not your role to recruit, but it is your role to look at their forward planning. And I would suggest somebody goes back, has a look at their Met numbers, as I did. There is a retirement bubble coming, which will put your recruitment figures. You'd have to run so hard to beat the retirement bubble, unbelievable. That's the kind of challenge you should be providing to the Met, to look at their own data so they can plan for their own future. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. First of all, Aman, I do apologise. You only came in for the finance one, so if you'd like to go now, we absolutely understand, and I'm sorry I should have done that before. Kaya, you mentioned meeting the police unions next year. How many meetings have you had with the Met Fed so far?
None as of yet. I obviously have...
None?
No, I've been here since the 28th of October. I've prioritised meeting. Every week I've been on community meetings. I've been meeting with commission services. I obviously have been meeting people through our board meetings, cross-sector partners.
Let's just concentrate on the specifics. The police union know how their officers are feeling. They are very, very important. The Met Fed are extremely important. If you want to know how your officers are feeling, they will know. They will know the issues. I cannot believe you've not had a meeting with them.
If I may, I have continually spoke to frontline officers through my visits, and to get those opinions, I've asked a lot of kind of open questions about how they feel. It is at the moment going through some of the work, the issues that they want to bring, the change that they want to see, the things they want to champion.
But
Labour
are so supportive of unions,
exactly. I am
and
a
that is what they are. I cannot believe it.
I don't know. Can I answer any questions? Is it?
Well, if it's going to be accurate, I am saying to you that the union, the police union, is very, very important. And I'm very surprised that I'd have hurt myself.
I am a lifelong, as soon as I could get a union card, I did. I'm a massive supporter of the union movement.
Yeah.
If you can look at my record in my previous job, I've worked tirelessly with the unions.
I'm sure you have, which is why I can't understand
which is why
this.
I am committing in the new year to meet with the police and unions.
Well, I should hope so too. I've never been a member of a union, have no intention of being a member of a union, but believe it or not, colleagues, but I would have hurtled myself to the Met Fed straight away because they've got their finger on the pulse. I'm very surprised, but I'll leave it at that. Kenny, you mentioned the metrics that you're going to start working with the police. When is that going to be prepared so that we can all be thrilled to watch it together?
I don't have an exact date for you. Hopefully as soon as possible, but I'll come back to you with more.
Approximately. I mean, we go to look for figures and they're not on dashboards for nearly a year now.
So I would want us to finish this so that as we go into the next performance and financial year, we all know what we're aiming for.
So not until April, May?
Well, we need to be finished before then, so I would hope, I mean, this is a bit random, but February I would hope to be able to give you more detail.
Dear, oh dear. And we wonder why things are going wrong. Everything takes so long. I'm really very unimpressed, I have to say. I'm going to leave my question because of time, so we'll go over to Assembly Member Duval.
Thank you very much. OK, can we go back to the inspection report? Am I right in being optimistic that you're going to get out of special measures? What's your predictions?
I mean, I wouldn't predict such an important piece of work. I mean, I've had a meeting, as I said, with the HMI. I think it's really important to understand, the scale of, Assembly Member Momoa mentioned the work that they were doing around children exploitation, the work we've just been talking about around culture, around workforce. These are huge pieces of work. I think it's also really important to understand that, the HMRC are looking for credible plans in these areas, and also that they're not just plans, that there is evidence of things progressing against those plans. Having a conversation with Lee Freeman, who is running this piece of work, I am assured at the level of challenge that has been going. I know that there's been regular checkpoints in with the Met, and that they haven't come to me with alarmed concern, but I wouldn't want to at this stage predict optimism.
Okay, but in the sense that you realise about trust and confidence that it's quite important in terms of the Met getting back on track on some of these areas. Yep. Absolutely,
and I think we saw how powerful the work the HMI did for the fire brigade and the impact that that's had, and championing the outstanding areas within the fire brigade. And obviously my real hope and dream would be that we'd be in a similar position.
Okay, let's turn to going back probably to the line of questioning that Lord Bailey did. I think you might have asked one of my questions, so I won't repeat that. But if we can go back to some of the attritional issues, how we look after initial recruits, that first 6 months, then that next couple of years around that, what role is MOPAC playing in that? And where, do you think we're giving enough support? And do you think you're sending the right signals to the MPS? Or do you think they don't need the signals? They understand that it's important about holding on to those recruits, not losing them in these initial stages?
I mean, I definitely think they get it. I mean, from everything that I've heard from around training, professionalism, I heard of a really innovative thing around having equipment lockers so that, officers on the street have quick access to equipment if they need it. I was impressed by the level of kind of, for lack of a better term, modern thinking around how they want to support officers. And I think we've seen that through the new Met for London plan. And, the Commissioner has been relentless in his, building the foundation back, having that kind of positive, supportive workforce. I know that that is in a very challenging space. I know that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that area, and the financials are obviously an ongoing concern, but I definitely recognise that they get that.
Okay, let's just then move on. And again, some of it was touched on earlier on, but it was specific in specific areas around, I think it was retirement issues that Lord Bailey was referring to. But let's just, the discussions around new initiatives and what are in the pipeline for the recruitment challenges, because they are wider, isn't there? We went through that blip that some of that was about trust and confidence, some of it about, well, is this the job for me? Why do I want to join this organisation? Around that. Where are we in new thinking around that recruitment piece, and is MOPAC influencing that agenda? The inspectors raised it as an issue. They didn't think it was there. We've had various crises that have contributed to the trust and confidence, and about why should I want to join an organisation that's tainted? Let's be honest about it, in terms of it was tainted for a period of time, right? Where are we on that? Where's MOPAC in that debate? Where do you think you're influenced in the MPS?
I mean, I think that this is why it's really important to be supportive of where they get it right, and, really championing and supportive of, the good work that officers are doing. And it is something that, talking around training, welfare, workforce recruitment. As I said the other day, I had a really good discussion with an officer from MOPAC and the AC from the Met, who's looking at workforce, about going through on what recruitment drives, the impact of those were. It was interesting, an MP suggested to me something similar around the armed forces, and explaining that there are different skills needed. I think, for me, one of the most impactful things is really remembering, and I think that this is going to be a key thing going forward with the neighbourhood policing, is remembering that they're a community service. And I think a lot of people are drawn to serve because of that. We've seen really positive campaigns around PCSOs in that area and specials, and I think that that's something that through the neighbourhood policing we need to continue to push. If I may, I was really struck by a piece of work that an officer did with the Young Ladies Club. They brought the Young Ladies Club into New Scotland Yard, and they had a really constructive conversation around the work that they do and why particularly black women didn't want to report, and breaking down myths. And actually on the back of that, one of the people that came on that visit has now joined as a recruit. So I think it's really important that we say what the Met does, why it's important, and take that forward.
Okay, so over the years, money meets workforce meets tackling crime. I always think about that somehow we shouldn't lose what the end product is tackling and preventing crime. Okay, so I believe passionately in warranted police officer. I understand the need for the numbers and why we need to focus on that. But the Met's actually, and really part of the HMIC alludes to this, it never quite does it because of the risk, is start talking about the capacity to act. So I think crime fighters are not just police officers. I don't think they're civilians. They're crime fighters, if you get what I mean. I think the distinction between support staff as being civilians makes them something. They're crime fighters. If they're sitting behind a desk, they're crime fighters. Everyone's on the front line. Neighbourhood coordinators are crime fighters. So, therefore, if I look at what the inspectorate says about recruitment and issues and what it's alluded to in past reports, the mix of crime fighters could give us differential outcomes and be where we had the previous conversation earlier on. So it's not just about police officers and warranted officers, it is about getting them from doing their proper jobs, which they are trying to do, but being forced to do support role jobs, which would be better supported for non-policing officers. Where are we in terms of the response to the inspectorate, where are we in our workforce planning, police and crime plan? And should we not, given the financial context, isn't, the settlement that we're about to receive is you need to move on to the next settlement in the comprehensive spending review. Isn't one of the key asks, if I go back to my 3 bits, isn't it about flexibility of finances, getting away from the straitjackets of budgets that says you can only spend this on police officers when actually you might not need to spend it on police officers? It would be great to have that flexibility to spend it on other crime fighters that would give us a better outcome in tackling crime, preventing crime. So where are we now? We're now at, I believe, a genuine point in policing where we need to have a proper conversation that puts warranted police officers at the top and understands that and respects that by using them properly in their warranted police officer roles. But where are we on the other crime fighters that could actually increase better performance in tackling crime? Is that going to feature in that? If when I read my police and crime plan, am I going to see a section on it, or is it one thing that we're going to have to raise?
I mean, I know that, Len, I agree with you to start with, but also it's something that I know that the Commissioner really strongly feels, and it's something that, as part of the transformation work that he's been doing, he's really been pushing because, as you say, we want officers in neighbourhoods. We all want more visible police. We know how reassuring that is for a lot of our communities. So that is something. And I think, talking to my equivalents, that's something felt across the country. And I think it is, I understand the need to have, obviously, an uplift in officers where possible, but also I think you're right about, and also, can I say, going to Lambeth and being in the command centre and meeting the people who are doing those calls. They are crime fighters. You're completely right, Len. They are, doing amazing work, supporting people, allocating cases from appointments to working with the TSG on really, difficult things. So, absolutely, and it's something that, pushing for that flexibility is really key.
Well, will you come back to this committee then, maybe outlining how we get from A to B and then on to the rest of the alphabet to achieve that? Because I don't think we can keep thinking that it's somewhere there, because I do think it's a big risk, but it could open up the doors to better policing outcomes.
Yeah, so you won't have to come back to us on talking about reforming the workforce mix in terms of this plan. You might want to come back to us and suggest we put more detail. I don't know, but it's in there. In terms of where we got to, the Met have got quite a good understanding of the roles that they could. I'll use civilian as a shorthand, but we understand what I'm saying and how that could be brought in. And I agree with the statement you're making. If you actually look at the workforce mix of the Met compared to other forces, they have a ratio roughly of sort of 3 to 1 rather than 2 to 1 as other forces do. Now, you wouldn't necessarily expect the Met, I suppose, to be the same as others, because you might get efficiency of scale when you're the size of the Met compared to other forces. So that's kind of fair enough, but I don't think you would expect it to be where it is. So I do think there's a lot to be done in that. It'll be interesting to see how the new government goes about doing the neighbourhood policing way and what lessons they do learn from the way the police uplift programme was done, because from a purely sort of, I suppose, my perspective anyway, it would be sensible to provide some of the flexibility if some of those 13,000 officers were people to be brought out from the back office and allow it to be filled with other, like, non-warranted crime fighters, to use your term, in order to get that workforce mix better. I mean, classic examples, if you look at online or economic fraud, what's the point really of having a a warranted officer sat there. I'd much rather have a sort of forensic accountant going through all the stuff, if I'm honest with you. Or why does that need to happen anyway as a police officer? Why can't you just have a PIP level 2 going through it or something? I mean, there's different ways of looking at this. It's a long way of saying I think I generally agree with you, and we have sort of addressed workforce mix in the plan.
Well, I want to echo what the Chair said earlier on. We need accelerators now because the pressure's on us in terms of trying to break the logjam. We're never going to get the full amount that we might deserve. Whatever we think, we're going to get a great deal, I think, out of this settlement. I think more so than we've had in the past. But the question then is, it still puts it back on us. How do we stop having the same continuous conversation without trying something different? But actually, you can minimise the risks. You can actually put the measures in. But something has got to come. Something has got to give. We've got to get government to be more flexible from those straight jackets of the money they give us that can only be used for it. But equally, we need to be ready to come up with the pilots to show that you can do this without risk to the community that we're serving and give greater crime outcomes. Do you know what I mean? In terms of tackling crime. Isn't that really what we should be doing?
I mean, yes, I agree with you, Len, and I think it's also, I mean, you mentioned pilots, and that's something that, you know, we need to, you know, we've done some brilliant pilots, and I will also say, you know, there's the internal mix, but there's also the wider support. So something that we discussed at the last CJS board meeting was actually between the CPS and the Met, what we're doing on case files, and, you know, so, you know, being really clear on that and how we want that to improve and who are the best people to be doing that is really important questions. So I agree with you, yeah.
Thank you. Assemblymember Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. We were talking at some length regarding the number of officers which are tied up in backroom jobs. Do you have any idea on the numbers that we're talking about here?
Not off the top of my head, sorry. I'd need to come back to you with that.
If we can get that in writing, that would be very helpful. Thank you. And we heard from the Police Federation in one of these meetings just a few months ago, and it was an incredibly important and useful meeting. So if you haven't yet met them, then please do, and also the College of Policing as well. I think it was probably one of the most useful meetings that we've had of this committee recently. And we touched on the business of police morale and pay, and they told us that 96% of respondents in the Met said that morale was either low or very low. So the question is, of course, what steps, in light of this evidence, what steps are the Mayor and MOPAC taking to address the issue of morale in the Met?
Thank you. I mean, I think that's why in the new plan, trust and confidence is something that we've prioritised, I think, because I think, you know, a happy workforce is part of that. And I don't think any of us are surprised by the level of low morale. I think, you know...
I have to say, when they said it was 96% low or very low, I was gobsmacked.
Yeah. Understandably, but I think, what I was going to go on to say is, you know, we've seen the similar in the NHS. We've seen, like, the decimation of public sector is wearing. It really is. And I think, you know, the conversations that, you know, I alluded to earlier around workforce, you know, building an organisation that we can, you know, the officers are proud to serve in is really important, and it's something that we're passionate about. I think that we can't expect trust and confidence of the public to improve if it's not started within, and I know that that's something that the Commissioner is keen to work with us on. And I think in terms of the Mayor and my role and MOPAC's role is, as I said, you know, we're not going to shy away from saying things when we need to, where improvement is needed. But I also think we need to make sure that we are championing and supporting and using, you know, one of the things I want to do as part of the relationship improvement between MOPAC and the Met is really look at how we're using our resources, our insight to support the work of the Met, and, you know, making sure when they do try a pilot that we are supportive in that evaluation, saying it works, because that's all part of, being supportive of what works. And, when they get positive outcomes, we need to talk about it. And that's something that I, in a recent conversation between the Mayor and the Commissioner, was something really strong. When they're putting out really positive comms about the work that they're doing, I think it's upon all of us to be promoting those messages, and really it improves the feel of safety of Londoners, shows that the work they're doing is impactful, and hopefully helps raise that morale too.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
I think one way of raising the morale of the staff is to talk to their union, but we've been through that. Assembly Member Best.
And I will.
Sorry?
Will.
Thank you. I think something that struck me was Assembly Member Roberts and yourself saying you're surprised. It doesn't surprise me at all from the conversations that I've had with officers. And I've said this before, and you can take it as a political point, but it's genuinely not. But officers don't feel supported by the political leadership in London. And so whether it's yourself or the Mayor, really engaging yourself, really putting yourselves in those police stations, having frank conversations and round tables around the canteen table with officers, putting a metaphorical cuddle around a lot of the officers in London. It's genuinely not a political point. It is just fact that officers in London don't think the political leadership supports them. I hear it time and time again, and I would like nothing more than for you to be able to address that, not to make that a political point. I would love to see you engaging more, and I accept you haven't had much time yet, but I think really engaging yourself in police stations, in comfortable environments for officers, like I say, around the canteen table where they can open up and feel supported. I hope we will see you doing that.
Yeah, I mean, you don't know me well yet, Assembly Member Best, but I feel something that really gives me joy in my work is that engagement, and I think that it makes me a better decision maker for doing it. I think when you hear from the front line, from communities, the lived experience, and one of the things that I'm keen to see is something that was mentioned actually in a previous canteen. They've now changed that into a kind of, for lack of a better space, well-being space, and that has had a real positive impact. That's something that I want to see. But you're right, making sure, and I've said this to the Deputy Commissioner, I really want to go out and speak to frontline officers. When I went to Enfield the other day to look at their command, clear hold build work, I'm conscious to make sure I'm talking to all of the officers about the work they're doing, what they're proud of, but also their challenges and their things. So I'm excited to continue to do that.
Yeah, thank you. And just to say, I know there'll be that engagement where you're going to see work, to do pop-up police events and those visits, but it's drawing that distinction from I'm here to talk to you about the work you're doing, and I'm here to talk to you about your well-being and how you feel in your job and how, as a Deputy Mayor, I can support you. And just to understand that distinction on those visits and that time.
Yeah, I mean, other than to agree with you,
yeah.
I do agree with you, but what I mean is I don't use those visits just to talk about work. I ask probing questions alongside that. Thank you.
Thanks. And then just quickly, Chair, I wanted to move back to the recruitment, just to ask what discussions you've had or seen in relation to the government supporting the Mayor in his mission to recruit 1,300 police officers.
Sorry, could you say the beginning part of the question?
What discussions have you had with the government around helping the Mayor to achieve his aim of recruiting 1,300 police officers?
I mean, obviously, recognising I've not been here for a long time, but obviously the conversations that we've been having around the budget and also talking to other MPs about the importance of that commitment, and talking to the Mayor himself, really working through the particular challenges for London around that, but also, what more we can be doing to support that.
And do you feel confident you'll see that funding? Because obviously the Mayor had that funding last year and had to give it back. So do you think there is successful conversations in getting that funding again?
I wouldn't want to, predict something that I can't, verify at this stage. But I think, I know that the government's been very clear on, that uplift, and I would be hopeful, but. And as I said again at the beginning of the committee, I know how this committee has championed the NIC grant, and that's something that hopefully we'll make sure that we're using to support neighbourhood policing.
Okay, thanks. The Londoners were promised that a Labour mayor with a Labour government quote in the wins in his sales would deliver 1,300 officers for them. So it's concerning now that there's no kind of news on that funding. It's also concerning looking at the fact that last year he had that funding and couldn't produce those officers. So how are we going to produce them without the funding? But I suppose that is lobbying for you for another day.
I mean, yeah, and I know that I've touched a little bit on it in the committee, and I think, I really get what you're saying. I really know how passionate the mayor is on this. I know how passionate all of us are on neighbourhood policing, and I think some of the things that we talked about today about civilianisation is really key to this. But I think as well that we are conscious in London of how for a range of reasons, housing, cost of living, that there will be recruitment, retention, that there will be things that we have to work through.
It comes back to that, don't make promises you can't keep, whether it's to WASPy women or whether it's recruiting officers in London. Don't promise people things that you can't deliver.
Okay, thank you. I've got several colleagues that want to come in. We must be mindful of the time. The only thing I will say is you did look very confused when my colleague asked you about those 1,300 officers. They were a manifesto commitment, and I do hope that the mayor doesn't just discard all his manifesto commitments. Assembly Member Garber.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I don't know, it's fine. In a response to a previous question, I know we spoke about the reasons for low and very low morale, but I just wondered if there was ever any discussion about moral injury, particularly, I understand it in the context of officers criminalising people who use drugs, and I just didn't know if that's ever discussed in terms of the moral injury that officers experience.
Could you say more? Sorry, Zoe.
So the injury to someone's morals, like their morale, like how they feel about the work that they're doing. I've spoken to officers who aren't from London, but who that's kind of a recognised response to criminalising people who use drugs. Obviously, yeah, just be interested to know if that's ever spoken about as people's feelings of morale.
That's really interesting, and I think Assembly Member Garber, if you...
it's a health condition.
Sorry. I think, reflective really of the conversation that you attended at the London Drugs Board, right? And I think we've seen through operations like ADA and Yamata, I knew it started with a Y, a very positive and supportive approach of looking at a kind of public health approach to policing drugs, and making sure that that it is a partnership between outreach, the NHS and the police to understand that. From my own experience, I think sometimes enforcement is always going to be part of this mix. We're working under legislation, but also...
I know we're short on time. It was more just moral injury, but maybe we can pick it up separately. But I know we're short on time, but yeah, I appreciate the discussion that happened at the London Drugs Forum, but yeah, I'll maybe send you some stuff on it.
Thank you. Yeah, we're short of time, and we're talking about the Peel report, Building and Supporting and Protecting Workforce. So, Assembly Member Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick point. When I mentioned that I was gobsmacked by the finding, not so much that there's low morale within the police, that it is so very, very low. 96% is the thing that I find gobsmacking, not the actual fact that there is low morale, which we're all expecting. Only 4% of officers thinking that they actually like going to work. It's just nuts. So that I just wanted to make that clarification.
Thank you, and you're completely right. Assembly, very short, please. Assembly Member Lord Bailey.
Just to make a point, this is why I made the point earlier on about the Chris Cabot case, because morale is hugely affected by for those officers, by political people in this building, including your chief exec, right, who made statements publicly that attacked their morale, their well-being. That's why I asked you as Deputy Mayor to take control of that. People made that case horrific for the police when it needn't have been, and they also made it horrific for communities, in this particular case, the black community. That's why I'm asking you as Deputy Mayor, my colleague, Assembly Member Best, talked to you about political support for the police. That's why I want to make it very clear to you that currently the political support from this building for the police, the Mayor, and MOPAC is very low as far as officers are concerned, and that's something that you, as a Deputy Mayor, can do something significant about.
I note your perception, Lord Bailey. However, I've heard the Mayor repeatedly talk about, you know, the importance of policing, the courage of police officers who run towards things that none of us would ever run towards. I've seen him, you know, at various things supporting and celebrating the police. And I, you know, as I said, I think my role is to be critical when needed, as a critical challenge, as an oversight thing, but also supportive where necessary.
All of that is outweighed when people in this building, again, professionals linked to MOPAC, make comments that make the police seem as if they're a racist organisation. So one bad comment significantly outweighs all the things that you've just said, and that's not my opinion, that's a fact. And when you see the Fed, which I have seen on a number of occasions, as well as the many police officers that I walk with, I'll clue you into why that happens another time, their perception is strongly against what happens in this building. That's why 96% of Met officers have low morale. A big part of that is how they feel they're perceived by their political overlords, is the word that one officer used.
I don't know where you've seen the data that says that that's direct causational link. I think, you know, as I said, I've seen the Mayor champion positively the work. You know, in the last week alone, I've seen him talk about depots.
Well, when you see the Fed and you meet officers, like I have been doing for the last probably 10 years, you will see there is a direct line. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, and I'll make sure you'll send some of the details around the Chris Carver case, because Lord Bailey is completely correct. It was a damn disgrace, quite frankly. Now, thank you for being patient, Assembly Member Desai. You're doing the last question on this section.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. So, Kaya, firstly, can I just say that I'm pleased that you're going to meet the Federation in the near future. They are an important organisation, but to be fair to you, you've been here for a few weeks and you can't meet everyone in the space of a few weeks. I think that point has got to be made. But my question is this. The Met Police Federation did a survey of police officers' experiences of Notting Hill Carnival, and the findings weren't very good. What action is being planned to improve officer safety at the Carnival?
Thank you, Assemblymember Desai. I know that you know that obviously the GLA and the Mayor's team are an intrinsic part of planning for Carnival, and the police are too. I know that there's a review going on currently that will be concluding in the new year about that, to make sure that we have enough time ahead of Carnival to take in all the aspects of, you know, having, you know, a brilliant Carnival. I mean, Carnival is something to, you know, that we should be globally proud of. But obviously, to be able to enjoy that, everyone needs to be safe in that. And, you know, meeting with the Gold for Carnival, I know that he is on hand, obviously, throughout, and makes, you know, a lot of key observations that are feeding into that review, and you know, so we will continue to work. I know that there's already regular meetings that happen as a kind of cross-sector board on this, with the organisers, with the police, with us, to make sure that everyone can enjoy, everyone, including the staff that are working there, a positive Carnival.
Thank you. I mean, one area that I would ask you to look into is the issue of stewarding, or the lack of it. I've been to Carnival every year since being elected in 2016, where the police committee had, and I do my own observations as well, not just going around with the police. And this year, the number of stewards were less than in previous years. And it's not just a question of numbers, it's a question of the right type of stewards. As one police commander on the day said to me, that they have to step in, sometimes to protect the stewards, and where they feel the stewards can't cope, then they've got a duty to intervene and ensure public safety. So I think it's the issue of being robust with the organisers of the Carnival as to the quality of stewards, the number of stewards, getting the right sort of sponsorship to help pay for stewards, for stewarding and so on. And I would again recommend you that you read our report from 2016-17, when the police committee, we actually visited this subject and did a report, the findings of which are still relevant. The report is called Making Police Notting Hill Carnival Better and Safer.
Thank you for that suggestion and that insight.
Yeah. Chair, should I move on to the next section? Or
No.
Can I?
I know. I'll call you in a minute, because I don't want to leave this. Have you actually read the Police Federation survey on the Carnival?
Yes.
Were you not appalled by some of the things that those officers come across, their attitude, their concerns?
I think that, I definitely talked to the Deputy Commissioner about it. I think, as I said, I think we need to feed it, that aspect of how the Met, feel working at Carnival needs to be reflected in the
They're frightened. They're frightened of it. They're frightened of being crushed. They don't feel safe. Does that worry you?
I mean, I think the safety of Carnival overall is exceptionally important. I mean, I worry about...
Let's concentrate.
Crushing.
This is a police board. Let's talk about the police that have to go and police the Carnival. So they are saying to their police fed, when you speak to them, eventually they will tell you they are very, very concerned about their own safety at this event. They have to go. The public choose to go. The police have to go. Did you hear when the Commissioner said that he talks about the possibility of a Hillsborough-style crush? Does that bother you?
I mean, absolutely. I think crushing is a key aspect that we need to look at in the safety of Carnival. Carnival has, because of its popularity, has grown exponentially, and that's why the review that's happening, the work that we're doing cross-sector on making sure we have the safest Carnival possible is something that's exceptionally important. And the workforce and the police supporting that is obviously key to that.
It is a victim of its own success. I have said that numerous times. I have never called for it to be stopped. But I have absolutely said that it is in the wrong place. And the more popular it gets, the more dangerous it gets. And the police officers that have to go, you say you've spoken to lots of police officers. You ask them what they think about the Carnival. They will tell you they don't feel safe. They are very nervous. And if the Commissioner himself is saying that he can envisage a Hillsborough-style crush, surely that raises alarm bells for the Deputy Mayor for policing in London.
Yes, I mean, I think, Susan, I'm agreeing with you, which is why this review is so important. It's why the meetings that we're doing in preparation for Carnival are so important, so that we do all we can to get it right.
So you're going to carry on in the same area where the Commissioner is telling you there could be an almighty crush, where police officers are saying loud and clear they do not feel safe actually even being there, and you're going to continue for it to be in the same area without any other thought. Is that right?
Chairman Hall, I haven't been, that's not a decision that I think that I can make at this stage.
What's your view? Okay, what's your personal view? I know what mine is. Many of my colleagues know what mine is. I would like to keep the police safe, let alone the people that go. But the people that go choose to go. The police officers don't choose to go. They have to go. They're sent there. They're sent into an area they do not feel in any which way safe, and they know they can't make sure that the party goers are safe either. Surely alarm bells should be going off at some point.
I mean, I think they are, and that's why we're doing the review, and that's why we're looking at every aspect of the carnival, and especially, you know, the workforce. And that's why I've heard the Mayor himself say we need to have a strong lead in time so we have enough time to get it right.
Well, if you want morale to improve in the police, I would suggest you do something drastic about this particular situation, because if you ask them the one event that they do not feel safe in, that they do not feel supported in, it will be the carnival. We can move on now to our next section, and we'll come back to this without... it's got to be very quick. And it must be on this subject. Don't
it's definitely on this. It's definitely on this subject. My last comment on drugs was related to morale, but this is about the fact that I don't know if you've got the quotes from the Notting Hill Carnival Limited Deputy Mayor, but it did say that this survey was quite clearly written in an anti-carnival agenda that the Police Federation highlights every year. It's driven by unsubstantiated quotes and a little solid evidence to decide to create negative headlines. And they said that this kind of rhetoric is questionable and has a detrimental impact on the event's planning. And I think we all agree here that increasing the stewards would make everyone a lot safer. And I'm obviously not forgiving any assault that happens to a police officer, which is obviously wrong. But I just want to make sure that you're hearing from Notting Hill Carnival as well.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, that's part of the conversation that we've had, and I think that's why it's really important that we have a thorough review with everyone around the table who is involved, so that, you know, I think I have not heard from one person that haven't said they don't want a safe carnival for everyone. So that has to be our kind of North Star, and why we need to work with everyone around the table. It's not helpful.
The ball is in your court.
It's not helpful.
The ball is in your court to do something about this. It is an unsafe event, and I sincerely hope that something... We will come back to it, don't worry. Assembly Member Desai and I will make sure we come back to it. We're now going on to the Chinese Embassy in Tower Hamlets. Assembly Member Desai.
Thank you, Chair. So, Deputy Mayor, as you may be aware, the police have objected to the location of the proposed Chinese super embassy, as I call it, at the Royal Mint Court in Tower Hill. Quite unprecedented, in my view, quite unprecedented. The letter from the counter-terrorism policing unit, which I have with me, commented on the possible negative impact on local policing and the parliamentary and diplomatic command, as well as possible increased policing costs. There are, of course, wider national security issues as well, which I won't go into now. Will you join me and the Met, Deputy Mayor, in sharing our concerns with the relevant planning authority?
Apologies, Assembly Member Desai. I'm conscious that this obviously has happened in the past, so I'm slightly playing catch-up. My understanding of the situation is that it went through the planning application at Tower Hamlets.
Twice.
Twice. And at both times it was refused, and the Mayor was clear not to intervene in that. So that I think is important. So, you know, the refusal has gone through. My understanding currently is that that decision has now been referred to the Planning Inspectorate at a government level, and therefore it's with the government to decide.
Yeah, no, but I'm looking at this from a policing aspect, and it's not just a local sort of Tower Hamlets issue. This is a London-wide issue, and that is where the police actually felt forced to sort of lodge objections. They were represented at the hearing, the second hearing, and they had a lawyer with them as well. That is how seriously they're taking this matter. So I'm asking from a policing perspective, with cost implications, with implications for the work of the Parliamentary Diplomatic Command Unit, what are your observations? Do you share the concerns that have been expressed so openly and strongly by the police in the letter of the 14th of November 2024?
I think, I mean, as you say, I think it's really important to note the police's level of concern at that committee, and that committee recognised that, and it was, you know, refused at that committee. And I'm sure that all of the evidence, you know, I've sat and referred things to planning inspectorates, and I know how fastidious the evidence that is put in front of the planning inspectorate is. So I'm sure all of that evidence will be considered.
Have you had any discussions, or will you be discussing any of these issues with the counter-terrorism policing?
Yes, I mean, I've already had, not on this specific case, but I've already had several meetings around the area of counter-extremism, counter-terrorism, and I recognise what you're saying around, you know, understanding as a global city the kind of international threats that we have in terms of, you know, exterior governments, and that's something that we discussed at the contest board recently.
Yeah, I mean, look, we both have experience of how the planning system sort of works, and at times when, so, you know, various individuals can't comment, but there's going to be inquiries starting on the 25th of January, and what I'm asking you in this meeting is to consider, well, to look at what the police are saying and to see what you can do to support them without, you know, so going to the wider planning sort of issues, but from the policing aspect, to share our concerns that I have shared from day one with the inspectorate.
If I may, Assembly Member Desai, is that something that we could have a meeting about, you know, and go through it together?
I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Assembly Member Best.
Thank you, Chair. And Kai, I just want to follow up on, it's really important actually to have a briefing on this specific item, not to allude to other items that you've discussed with counter-terrorism. This is really concerning, I think, for Londoners. You never see the Met, I think, speak up on planning applications like this. And actually, the way in which the Prime Minister met with Jinping and then this was suddenly called in by the UK government from Tower Hamlets Council certainly doesn't sit right, I think, with a lot of people. And now it's a case of you, I think, to stand up for what the Met are saying. And can you make sure that you do make representation in that application and stand with the Met alongside their concerns?
Thank you, Assembly Member Best. I think, I mean, I really hear the strength of feeling on this particular case. I will endeavour to meet Assembly Member Desai, review the situation and come back to you on it.
Thank you. And briefly, Assembly Member Moema.
Thank you. I will be brief. So I would really welcome some input or some involvement in that meeting you may have with Assembly Member Desai. I'm deeply concerned that we share the basic command unit, which covers Tower Hamlets, also covers Hackney, and that's already a very stretched force with lots of local issues, and obviously international issues affect what happens at home quite substantially in that neighbourhood, as you well know. And so I can only echo what others have said here. I'm deeply concerned about the operational impact of having this embassy in a location which is completely not suitable for something of that nature. So I just want to make sure that we follow that up early in the new year.
Thank you, Assembly Member. That would be exceptionally helpful.
Lovely. So, yes, all members would be appreciative of that. Thank you. Right, I would like to thank our guests for attending this morning and for their answers to our questions. And as we won't be seeing you until next year, may I wish you both, or may we all wish you both, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Can I ask the committee to note the report and the discussion? Thank you. Can we note the monthly report from MOPAC? Can we also delegate authority to me as chairman in consultation with party group lead members to agree any outputs arising from the meeting? Thank you. And can I ask the committee to note its work programme? The next meeting of the committee is scheduled to take place on Wednesday, the 15th of January 2025 at 10 a.m. in this chamber. And as I have no urgent business, today's meeting is concluded. Thank you.
This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.